Warning. The Maverick Marketer is not for the soft, timid, or faint-hearted. If you need permission or seek approval from your mother, spouse, mates in the pub, or anyone else for that matter, this really isn't for you. If any of what you've heard puts you off in the slightest, I advise you not to listen any further. You've been warned. Prepare yourself for the no bullshit, zero fluff. Quick, dirty, and uncensored secrets for any serious coach, trainer, consultant, or speaker who wants to earn more money with less work and fewer headaches. Without having to kiss ass or bend over backwards to please anyone. He's a relentless and fearless renegade who will stop at nothing to reveal the harsh, unforgiving, and brutal truth about what it really takes to succeed in this business. He's a guy people love to hate and hate to love. It's your host, Drew Edwards. The Maverick Marketer is Unleashed.
Well, hello and welcome to another episode of the Maverick Marketer Unleashed. I am, of course, joined by my co-host, Terry Edwards. And also, we've got with us today a very special guest, Peter Thomson. Peter is someone who's sort of well known for helping coaches, trainers, consultants, and hypnotherapists to write, create, and market their own informational products. And he's actually someone who both me and Terry have learnt from, and actually sort of, like, we were clients of Peter's, both on separate occasions as well. He's sort of responsible for helping us create our first product, which was a continuity program. And we'll perhaps talk more about that on the call. But Peter, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm delighted. I'm absolutely fantastic. Thank you for asking, Drew. And hi, Terry. Good to speak to you both.
Good to speak to you, Peter. The other thing I'd add as well, we go back a long way, don't we, Peter? A long, long way in terms of how long we've known each other.
How long is it? Must be 30 plus years, isn't it?
I was going to say 25. Yeah. I mean, we were both 4 or 5 at the time when we met. So.
Too true. Yeah, I know. Just think what's happened over all those years and the difference that we've made to so many people's businesses, and in return, how the differences that have been made to our own businesses as well. This is just such an amazing industry to be in.
Yeah, isn't it just? Yeah.
So, Peter, for anyone who doesn't know of you, can you tell us a bit about your background and what you do now?
Come on, Drew, that's a lovely open question. Have we got a couple of hours for me to do that bit? Okay. I've been in business now for 45 years. And just to give you a brief background, I started working in the bank, and then I left that very quickly and went into self-employment. And I was a private investigator in Birmingham, and I ran the biggest tracing agency, tracing absconded debtors. We were asked to trace 4,000 people per month after a couple of years in business. And we used to repossess credit cards, and we used to repossess TVs, and we used to find people, particularly shopkeepers, who had absconded owing their creditors money. And from there I developed more into the investigation side of things, into bugging and debugging, which was a fascinating business to be in. I've got some really hairy stories I could share with you one day over coffee. And from there, because of the bugging and debugging business, I got involved in the car telephones industry. And in the very early days of car phones, when they were still press to speak and release to listen, and you couldn't even dial on them, they were all connected by the operator and simplex communication, as I say. And that led me by mistake, and isn't it funny how these things happen in life, into the leasing industry, because I actually sold a car phone to a guy who explained leasing to me, and it just sounded to me like a license to print money. And sure enough, it was. And so I started a leasing company in Birmingham called Compass Leasing, and we changed it to a PLC, which you can do as a marketing thing. And I ended up selling that 5 years later for lots of millions and retired for a while. And then over the last 20 plus years, I've been helping other people grow their businesses. And then particularly as I got to write and share my ideas through books and audio programs and videos and seminars, I decided I would help people who were coaches, consultants, speakers, trainers, people who are in what I call the helping industry, by showing them how to do some of the things that I'd learned to do over the years and sharing the lessons I'd learned from others and that I'd learned by my own application. And here we are today, and I spend my life with my private clients, helping them be more successful, particularly on the profitable side of things, and I run mentoring groups for people like that to help them be more successful. And I had a ball doing it. So great question, Drew. I'm sorry it was a short answer.
That's great.
Brilliant. Again, Peter, this is a question that I like to ask just to break up the interview a bit before we get into the main content, and also just so our listeners can find out a bit more about you, sort of on the personal side. But can you tell me one thing about you which a lot of people don't know? So an interesting or funny story or fact?
Yes, I can. When I was 2 years old, my birthday is in September. When I was 2 years old, just on New Year's Eve, so I'd be 2 years and a few months, I'm sitting in a living room in Birmingham with my sister, who's 4.5 years older than me. Her name's Robina, not Ribena, but Robina, because we come from a Scottish background. And my sister Robina was warming her hands by an electric fire. And in those days, because we're talking a fair few years ago now, electric fires and other things did not have guards on them. So the electric fire was a one-bar electric fire with no guard. So I'm sure you can picture that. And she was warming her hands. She would be 6 in a bit. And I decided to copy her. And I reached out and grabbed the bar of the electric fire. Ooh. I spent months in hospital while they rebuilt my hands. When I became 7 years old, I'd grown, my hands had grown, but unfortunately the skin grafts hadn't grown, so I couldn't open my hands. My hands, you can imagine, I'm holding them now, not quite fists, a little bit open, but I couldn't open them more than that. And so I had to go back into hospital for another month or so, and they cut all my hands open again, took some more skin off my arm, and sewed it in between my fingers, which is why I have hair growing in between my fingers, because it's the skin off my arm. So, you know, most people say the sign of madness is having hairs growing on the palms of your hand, and the second sign is looking for them. Well, I actually do have this. It's a reality. I'm looking at them now. And thereafter, they were pretty good, albeit my hands are fairly thin, having burnt all that stuff off. But the strange thing is that I then became a goalkeeper at football, a wicket keeper at cricket, and a writer as a job, and a golfer. So if those aren't 4 things that don't use hands or do use hands, I don't know what else did. So the one thing that it taught me, and I've learned to get past this since, but for many, many years of my life until about 3 years ago, it made my highest value control. And the reason it made that, and this is the thing that most people don't know, is that when I was 7 years old and I'm nearly coming out of hospital, most of the big bandages and plaster of Paris had been taken off. The nurse took me into the side ward and run a bowl of warm water with some Lux Flakes. Drew, you're not old enough to remember Lux Flakes, but Terry, you are, I'm sure. And these soft Lux Flakes, this nurse said to me, put your hands in this bowl of water, Peter, and don't take them out till I come back. It'll soften your skin and help with the healing process. She went away and she left me and forgot. And nobody came back to me for 7 hours. Wow. So I stood there with my hands in this water for 7 hours. Now, if you've got your hands in water, it makes you want to pee anyway. Within 7 hours, as a 7-year-old kid, you're going to piss twice, you know. So this taught me to distrust authority figures, and I lived with that for another 60-odd years. And so I was always cautious with authority figures. So that created good stuff and challenges in my life that I wouldn't accept to authority. I've managed to get past it now and change that that top value from control to flexibility. So that's not something that many people know.
Awesome. Good stuff. So, I mean, tell me a bit more about that. You said that your distrust for authority figures have led to some sort of challenges in your life. What challenges have you had to face?
Well, one of my first job was my father wanted me to have a proper job. So I went to work in the bank. And because I'm fairly easy to talk to people and like people, they put me quite quickly onto permanent relief, where I would go to different branches and fill in for somebody who was on holiday, which was great because you got paid expenses. And therefore you could bank your salary and keep it and live off your expenses. But there was one branch in Birmingham that people didn't like to go to as relief. There was 3 of us who did relief work. And they asked me to go, and I know the other 2 had been asked and turned it down. And I said, no, And the way I said it was obviously a bit blunt, because the manager of the branch, which was a big branch in Birmingham, said, "It's about time you learnt to take orders." And I said, "Here's my resignation." He said, "I'll accept it, but you're still going next week." I didn't, because I believe in being in control of my own life and my own results and my own actions, and even stronger in those days. And so I said no, and my no meant no. And so there wasn't anything he would do or could do about that. And so, for example, I remember being on a plane once out of Coventry Airport. You probably know it's closed down now. It's a small airport because it had all rubbish planes in it. And we took off to go to Valencia, and about 15 minutes into the flight, the captain said, "I'm sorry, we've got to go back. We've got a problem with one of the controls that tells the plane it's in the air." And I looked round the plane, and this is no exaggeration, the surround of the windows was held in with sellotape. Not the integrity of the window, but the surround. And this was an old bucket of a plane. And I'd got my wife and my 4 sons with me, and I said, "We're not flying on this. We've already got a problem with it." So I rang the overhead bell, and the stewardess came along, or aircrew, I think we should say these days. And I said, "We're getting off." And she said, "Well, no, we'll fix it. We won't be that long." I said, "Yeah, I understand that, and we're getting off." And so she tried to persuade me again, and I just used this broken record technique, which I'm sure you know, which is you understand and believe, and then you just agree, and then say, and then you just repeat what you're going to do. And I'm getting off. So then she went to get the captain, and the captain came along, of course, another typical authority figure. And he said, "Well, look, so this is what we're doing. We're soon going to be repaired, and we'll be on our way." I said, "Look, nothing to do with time. I'm looking around the plane. I'm surprised that you fly it, and myself and my family are getting off." And then he tried the guilt trip and said, "You do realize we'll have to unload all the baggage?" I said, "Yes, I understand that, and I'm getting off." and I stood up, and he realized I was getting off, and I got off, and so did all my family, because I wouldn't fly on that plane. And so sometimes this run-in with authority can be fun, and sometimes, and I've had great conversations with police officers over the years. And sometimes it could get in the way, because if you have to be in control, then you can miss things in life. So I learned from one of the best coaches in the world, a woman called Liz Ivory. I don't know if you know her. I went on a 5-day course with her and her partner, Richard Wilkins, and I learned to change that control value into flexibility. And boy, has that made a major difference for me. I mean, these days I'm so laid back you wouldn't believe it. So hopefully that might be a lesson for someone else that they could pick up from that, if they feel that sometimes they have to be in control. I still like to be in control, by the way, but I allow myself to be flexible now.
You're listening to Maverick Marketer Unleashed podcast. For show notes, additional resources, and podcast updates, head over to www.maverickmarketerunleashed.com.
Yeah, so there's a number of things there, Pete. I'm going to go back to the incident with your hand, first of all. I'm not one to spread rumours, but I can see now where when people say you're tight-fisted, it perhaps wasn't quite what I thought they meant.
I don't think I've ever been accused of being that. I'm probably the most generous person I know, and particularly with compliments to myself.
And on a more serious note, Peter, it would be fair to say, actually I'll get your opinion, would you say that you're unemployable?
100%.
Yeah.
You're absolutely unemployable. And that's the case with you two, as it is with me, and I'm sure with many, many people that you deal with and I deal with, that we get to a stage in life where our ability to earn money is something that we're really certain about. And our ability to be in control or to be happy to take responsibility for our actions, our results, and our lives, it's something that we don't wish to delegate to somebody else, whilst we're happy to help them get the results that they want, provided we can all play the part that we play so well, rather than try to play a part that we wouldn't play well.
Yeah, good point. That there about responsibility is it's critical, isn't it? Accepting responsibility.
It is. I remember Brian Tracy, who was actually a friend of mine, and I remember Brian saying on one of his very early programs, and I bought his early programs many, many, many years ago, and he said that you should go around saying two things: I like myself, I am responsible. And I started doing that 30 plus years ago, running that process that Brian had suggested. I like myself, I am responsible. And you say the stuff long enough and you start to believe it. And I think taking that responsibility, because unfortunately so much of the world believes that the rest of the world owes them a living, and they want to abdicate, not even delegate. They want to abdicate responsibility to either the state or somebody else rather than taking responsibility. And I think once you're 21, maybe even 18, once you're 21, you have to take responsibility for your life, your actions, and your results. If it's to be, it's the old expression, isn't it? If it's to be, it's up to me.
Yeah, excellent. Some real gems there. And sorry, so as you said that, I mean, in what you've shared so far, Peter, there's been so many gems. But the thing that you said, could you just elaborate, if you don't mind, on the understand, agree, and respond, and that whole concept? I'm very familiar with it, but I'm not sure if everybody would be familiar with that concept, Peter.
Terry, I don't know it in the words that you're saying it to me, so you'll have to open the loops in my head in a different way.
Okay, my apologies. Were you talking about when you were on the plane and you want to get off the plane?
Oh, right, okay.
You called it the broken record technique.
Yes, I did, yes. Basically, you're very happy to agree with what's being said without saying you agree to do what's being said. So I'll have to take everybody's bags off. Yes, I understand that, and I agree you will. And you always use and, not but, because but is confrontational. But tells people you're going to disagree, and tells people you're going to add something, and I'm still going to get off. And it's said pleasantly, it's said firmly, so it's not aggressive. It's firm, but it's not aggressive, and it's pleasant, and it can be said with a smile. And as long as you say it in the right tonality, and you look people in the eye when you say it, you're not at all shifty about it, people know that you mean it. And that's the way it is. It's like a friend of mine who was a solicitor told me a technique. If you ever get stopped for speeding, and many, many years since I've been stopped for speeding, I'm certainly more careful these days. He said that you should say to the police officer, when they've talked to you about the speeding, was there anything else wrong with my driving other than the speeding? And when they say no, because there probably wasn't, right, if you weren't driving dangerously, then you need that piece of information should it ever go to court.
Of course.
Because, of course, you could admit to the speeding because it's a fact.
Yeah.
If there's nothing else wrong, then it's only speeding. And that's a whole different thing from dangerous driving.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like I was stopped. The last time I was stopped is probably about 5 years ago. And I was driving home from seeing my sister with my wife, Sharon. And I was driving into the sun, so I was quite careful. I was slowed down off a major road into a minor road. And I was probably doing about 35, and it was 30, so I was speeding. And a police officer stood out in front of me. And fortunately, I saw him as a sort of shadow in front of the sun and hit the brakes. And he came round, he was very aggressive, the way sometimes they can be. And he was straight in my face, like this. And of course, that just puts me into control mode. It doesn't frighten me, it just puts me in control mode. And he said, do you often speed? I said, yeah, I think I do. I said, like most people, I'm probably usually a few miles over the speed limit. And he said, he couldn't believe that I'd admitted that, you see, because he expected me to defend it and go, no. He said, are you telling me you speed? I said, yes, of course I am. I said, everybody speeds. Do you want me to tell you lies instead? Which would you prefer? So he didn't know what to do with me, did he? He sent me on my way, couldn't cope with it. The benefits of being in control. I mean, this sounds like I'm a bullshit person. I'm not. Seriously, I'm not a bullshit person. But I am happy that I'm me.
Yeah. Awesome.
I don't need somebody else to tell me what I can and can't do.
Good for you, Peter.
So, Peter, can you touched on it very briefly at the beginning, but can you tell us about how you a bit more about how you got into the industry and how you came to work with coaches, trainers, consultants, speakers? Can you tell us a bit more about that?
I can, yes. It was a thing that happened that didn't go well, and then you've got to learn from it. And what happened was I'd sold the business, I'll tell you the numbers. I'd sold it for 4.2 million. I'd run it for 5 years. I set it up in 84 and I sold it in 89 for 4.2 million. And I got 2.6 million at the front and 1.6 million at the back after a 1 year earn out if I hit the numbers. And we did hit the numbers. Had some challenges along the way, but we hit the numbers. So out of that 4.2, it was $1 million in money, in cash, and it was 3.2 in shares. But unfortunately, the company I sold out to, which was a main board London public company, proper company, not some 2-bit thing, unfortunately, it ran into difficulties. We could have a private conversation as to why. It's not something I'd record. And the shares fell out the sky. And they dropped from £2.42, which was the price I'd taken them at, to 16p.
Good heavens.
So it cost me £3 million. So there was me, one day a millionaire, the next day really struggling. And of course, even though you do your best for tax avoidance, not tax evasion, you still do pay some tax. I had a tax bill for £225,000, which I paid to the tax man. And so life got a bit difficult, The air prices were falling, the economy was tanking, house prices were falling, interest rates were at 15%. Things were quite difficult to say the least. And so I sat down one day and I wrote myself a question because this is a real technique I use. I absolutely do this all the time. And I wrote myself a focused question. And I learnt this from Earl Nightingale on Lead the Field. And so I wrote a question to myself and I said, Peter, what do you love doing? ? And I always put the question mark because the question mark is the enter key on my neck-top computer. And I wish I'd come up with that originally because I think it's a great idea, but it is the enter key. It tells your mind to go and find answers. And so I wrote down the things that I love doing. And I love standing and speaking. I love sharing my ideas. I like dealing with people who've got integrity. I never deal with tossers. I have a perfect expression which says in life, DDWT, don't deal with tossers. They burn your time, they burn your energy, they burn your money. Just don't deal with them. And anybody listening to us will know exactly the sort of people I'm talking about. So, it's the way it is. I'm saying it with a smile in my voice, but I mean it seriously. And so I realized that I had created a plan of what I wanted to do. So what I wanted to do was to write and record my ideas. And I wanted to do it specifically for people who are coaches, consultants, speakers, and trainers, and the people who were doing the sort of thing I was doing at the time because I felt I could help. And so I went to Nightingale Conant, who are the world's biggest audio training company, and I didn't go with an idea because I knew they would be bombarded by people with ideas. I wrote and recorded a 30-cassette program called Action is the Key, and I sent it to Nightingale Conant with all the marketing to go with it. I'd written the direct mail to go with it, the lift letter and the envelope teaser copy and all the rest of it. And I sent it to them as a pack. And they came back to me and they said they liked the program, but they didn't think it was appropriate for their market. It was a bit salesy for what the stuff they were doing at the time. But they liked my voice. They were looking for someone with a British voice as opposed to an American voice to help them penetrate the British market. And would I be interested in revoicing Lead the Field? I mean, that's like being asked to rewrite the Bible. I mean, yeah, of course I will. So I've seen the gold disc that Phil Nightingale got for Lead the Field when it came out as a record called The Stranger's Secret. It's hanging in their Chicago office. Excuse me, guys, I'm just going to have a sip of tea. I've just got a slight tickle in the throat. Won't be a second, I'll put my hand over the mic. Hopefully that cough didn't come through too loudly. Excuse me. So I said, yes, I'd be delighted to. So I actually revoiced Lead the Field, and they used it as their lead client generation, customer generation program for many years in the UK. And they even sold it occasionally in America. And from there, I recorded another program for them, Conversation, the Power of Persuasion, and then Accomplishment, the Science and Practice, and various other ones, Vocabulary Power, all sorts of different things. And they sold them in America as well. And so I realized that my voice worked for the marketplace and the ideas I had worked for the marketplace. And the business took off. And that's really how I got involved in the start of the business, by having to sit down and decide what I was going to do with my life when the all the shares had fallen out of the sky. I actually lost my house at the time. I gave it back to the bank, and I lived in this beautiful 7-bedroom mansion with 30 acres and the River Avon running through it, through the garden, not the house. All of that had been fun. And I had a lovely little 3-bed bungalow down on the south coast near Paynton. And the end of this bungalow was glass. And when I had to move there, all the boxes of all of our stuff that we had moved there, I had it stacked against the glass window so I couldn't see the view. And Sharon and I agreed we would never look at that view again until we'd sorted out our life.
Wow. Awesome. It's a great story.
So, Peter, can you, again, just for anyone that sort of doesn't know of you, can you give us sort of just a quick overview of your business model, what you do now to generate leads and win clients?
Yes, of course, delighted to. I learned years and years ago that it's better to give before you ask to receive. And therefore, I like to give out very good quality information. So over 20 years ago, really before people were doing this in any mega way, I created this idea of having a 7 big mistakes report. And I wrote one, it must be at least 20, 25 years ago, called 7 Big Mistakes. The 7 big mistakes business owners are unwittingly making, costing them a fortune in lost turnover, lost profits, and what's even worse, lost personal cash, and how to avoid them. So it's this great long title, but it told you exactly what it did on the tin. And I used to market this report free, and then we would follow it with a phone call, and on that phone call, we would offer a 45-minute consultation. And the consultation would give people fantastic ideas to grow their business, and particularly those people who are accountants, consultants, speakers, trainers, etc., and very small business owners as well. And that really worked well. And then on that same call, we would offer or promote a product that I'd made. And we made a big product called the Accelerated Business Growth System, which was sold at £3,000, and albeit the payment systems. And so that's how we started generating leads. And so then, to capitalize on that, I went out to the marketplace with email marketing in a big way, and offering this free report and a monthly and a weekly e-zine, or blog, perhaps we might call it these days, an e-zine called TGI Mondays. Thank God it's Monday, instead of thank God it's Fridays. And I actually had TGI Mondays, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays, Saturdays, and Sundays. But I only used TGI Mondays as the main lead generator, and I would offer people quality information before I went back to them, and then suggested that if they liked the stuff that I'd given them free, they might want to move on to higher up or deeper in the connection and maybe have a day with me. And if they had a day with me, then at the day I would give them fantastic value at a very low price, and then I would promote a 3-day event. And on the 3-day event, which again was crazy low price in considering the sort of value we gave, I would offer a 12-month mentoring program. So my basic process was free information and then 1, 3, 12. And of course the 1 needn't be a 1-day, it could be a 1 hour, and the 3 needn't be a 3-day, it could be a 1-day. And the 12 could be a 6-month or a 24 or whatever. But the basic idea of giving somebody something of real value free of charge. And the mistake I see that happens there, Drew, is that sometimes when people create free reports or webinars or 1-day events, they hold back their best stuff.
Yeah.
Hey, this is the biggest mistake I see coaches, consultants, speakers, and trainers making. Instead of sharing their fantastic stuff first, they share their mediocre stuff first. And then people think they're mediocre. Instead of sharing their best stuff first, then people go, wow, this person knows some fabulous stuff. I'll go to the next bit. And so it goes on. I mean, you've got to have good stuff, obviously. You've got to have lots of good stuff. But that's not a difficult thing to create over time.
Yeah. And again, that's something that we have to deal with as well, because, I mean, we sort of, obviously a lot of it we learned from you is about giving away something for free in order to sort of begin the relationship. But you do get a lot of resistance there, because people are reluctant to give away their best stuff because they think that if they do that, people won't want to buy from them.
I know, it's rubbish. It's rubbish.
Yeah. No, it is 100%. Yeah. And again, I think one thing that we always say is that when it comes to giving your best stuff, so whether it's an ebook or an event, what you give away, and I don't know how you feel about this, Peter, is what we say is that you give away the what they need and the why they need it, but you don't necessarily give them the detailed how. Does that make sense?
That not only makes sense, I totally agree. It's words I use myself, not as eloquently as you said it there, because you said it beautifully succinctly. It is that simple. You might give a bit of how, but it's,
Yeah.
I've said this: if you teach people what, you get paid. If you teach people how, you get wealthy.
Excellent.
And that's exactly the same process, because for free and for minor money, you will then teach people what, and as you added in there, rightfully do, you teach them the why as well.
Yeah.
But when it gets to the how stage, that's when people start to pay you and pay you very well. So when you teach people, I'll add it to, when you teach people what and why, you'll get paid. When you teach people how, you'll get wealthy.
Awesome.
You're listening to Maverick Marketer Unleashed podcast. For show notes, additional resources, and podcast updates, head over to www.maverickmarketerunleashed.com.
Awesome.
Some real gems here, Peter. Thank you so much. Excellent.
Thank you. I'm enjoying it as much as you are.
Yeah, excellent.
Peter, one question I was sort of dying to ask earlier is you mentioned that when you had to sell your sort of 7-bedroom mansion and you moved, and you put all your boxes against the sort of the glass front of your bungalow so you couldn't see the view. How long did it take you? How long was it before you got to take all the boxes down and look at the view? How long did it take you to go from sort of what was essentially, I guess, almost rock bottom to where you felt successful enough that you sort of could see the view again?
3 months only. What we did was we converted the garage. It was a normal sort of size garage. We knocked a hole in the end of it so I could see the thing. And I put one old desk in that I'd still got, and we put some curtains up against the walls so that it would be warm and slightly noise-proof. Yeah. And I went down to the local egg manufacturer guy called Ken the Egg, and Ken the Egg gave me, because I asked him for some egg boxes, and I went to B&Q and bought some copy decks, and I glued the egg boxes onto the wall above my desk into the corner to make a recording studio, right? Because I couldn't afford that clever, funny-looking stuff that soaks up the sound. And I'd kept my 4-track recorder, and so I sat there writing and recording audio programs and selling them. And in the meantime, I did sales training, and so I would do cold sales calls, pick up the phone people, and I'd do direct mail. And my basic direct mail process was I sent free information, and I asked people to send for free information. I could tell you some more techniques I learned there, but it took about 3 months for me to start to get some good business. And I'm pretty good with getting referrals, so I'm referral conscious. So when I first meet somebody, part of the gathering process that I go through when I meet a new potential client is to understand the possibility of referrals once it's working well. Because I feel I've opened the files in somebody's mind that when I then go back for referrals, it's not like a cold thing I'm mentioning sort of out the blue. Oh, by the way, can you give me some referrals? I've already sort of salted that up early in the very first conversation.
Yeah. You've almost preconditioned them to expect that you're going to ask for referrals later on.
I actually used to do it, actually that strongly. I used to make it part of the deal. Yeah.
Awesome.
So I built, I could and did build that business and other businesses I've built very much on referrals, some good direct mail to start with, and then referrals on the back of it. And the direct mail bit, do you want me to just talk about that while we're on the
please.
Yes, please, yeah.
I created a little audio program called Once Upon a Time There Were Two Frogs. And I did a head-to-head test, and I rented 2,000 names, and 1,000 of those names I sent the cassette to. So I had 1,000 cassettes done.
Yeah.
These days we'd probably use CD or maybe paper or maybe even a web page, but whatever. I actually sent 1,000 cassettes, and then the other 1,000 I sent them a letter asking them to ask for the cassette. So I wanted to test it. You two know as well as I do, you never do any marketing without a test. You've always got to have a test, otherwise you waste an opportunity to learn something new. And the way it worked out was that the people who asked for the cassettes was 3.6%, so that's 36 people. And the people who responded to having been sent the cassette was 1.1%. 11 people. So immediately that taught me it was probably better to ask people to ask for it, because then I only had to make 36 cassettes.
Yeah.
As opposed to sending 1,000 out, right? And they were slightly more qualified by having asked. Now, I didn't have a reply paid card. I didn't have a reply coupon or anything. I made people phone me in order to respond to either the cassette or to phone to get the cassette. And the reason I did that was I was trying to suppress response, which sounds a bit strange, but I wanted to suppress response because it was just me. So I wanted people, you don't misunderstand this, the language I'm going to use, I wanted them to jump through a few hoops in a nice way of saying that. So that by the time I got to speak to them again, then they pre-qualified themselves as serious people. Because I didn't want 100 replies and couldn't phone them all, because you know as well as I do, another day older, another day colder. And I wanted to make sure those leads were hot, so that when somebody phoned up for the thing, I would send the cassette, and 2 days later I'd be back on the phone saying, I don't suppose you've had a chance to listen to it yet. And of course they'd say no, because they hadn't.
Yeah.
So I knew what the answer was likely to be, so I asked a question that focused on the likely answer. You know, so many people ask questions without having a clue what the answer might be, and then they stumble and stutter past that point because they get surprised. Whereas if I was pretty certain they wouldn't have listened to it by then. And so to say, I don't suppose you've had a chance to listen to it yet, most people said no. And for the few who said yes, it didn't matter. So it was thinking through the process. And the amount of business I did from the two, the 1.1, the 11, and the 36, was about the same. So it proved to me at that point that it was far better to get people to ask for the free information. And that worked, and I've used it ever since. And the cassette actually was me explaining my view on training and why it didn't work, because I had some fairly firm views on that, and then telling the story about once upon a time there were two frogs. But the story, although it was the title of the cassette, didn't come till the end of the side, and therefore you had to listen to everything I had to say to get the story. And I kept salting it up by saying, oh, I haven't forgotten about the story, I'll come back to the frogs in a minute. Then I'll go on about something else, and I go, oh, you know those frogs? I'm coming there in a moment. I'll just kept doing that until the frog story was right at the end, and it seemed to work. So it started the business, and we went from there.
And that was 3 months. Fantastic.
3 months, yeah, 3 months.
Wow. In my the story, I used to work with a chap called David, who was a very successful salesperson when I was in recruitment, and his conversion rate was probably 70-80%. And I remember asking him once, how do you do that? What's your secret to your success? And he said something that stuck with me, and you just reminded me of it, Peter. He said, I only sell to people who are looking to buy. So he really qualified out those that weren't interested, what we call tire kickers. Yeah, and he would only go along to meetings where they were looking to buy. And that was a real eye-opener to me, because it's like, sugar, that's something I'm just not doing. And you've just given a great example there, Peter, with the qualifying the buyers.
Yeah, it's so true. It's like, I love that Jim Rohn, God bless him, he's left us now, isn't he? I love that Jim Rohn story about when he was a young salesman, and his sales manager turned round to him and he said, Jim, how many sales calls have you done this week? And Jim, who hadn't done very many, went, well, and the sales manager stopped him and he said, Jim, well doesn't fit in the box. Only numbers fit in the box. How many sales calls have you done, right? And that focused my mind on the fact of, you're not going round just trying to tick a box, say, I went on a call. That's irrelevant. That's what you do if you have an employee mentality, right? If you have an employer mentality, if you have a success mentality, you make sure that every action you take, where at all possible, is an action that has the possibility of generating the result that you want. You know, there's a fantastic 4-page report online that was written probably 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 years ago by a guy called Albert E.N. Gray, and I think it's Gray. Albert E.N. Gray. Anybody, it's easy to find. And it's called The Common Denominator of Success. And here's the gist of it in just a couple of words. Albert E.N. Gray says this. He said, successful people focus on pleasing outcomes. Failures focus on pleasing actions. Now, pleasing actions is, oh, I've done another sales call, I can put a tick on the form. pleasing outcomes is I went to see somebody, they bought something. Where's your focus?
Yeah.
I don't know. I love meeting people. I love going to meetings and having great, especially new people I've never met. You know, I recently flew to, I won't mention the country because some people would know where I was, but I flew to a European country just before Christmas, and I was meeting 5 directors of the board of a big company, right? And I just was absolutely loving it. I flew there and back on the same day. It was a windy day. It wasn't the best flight in the world, but nevertheless. And I got in there and I had an hour and a half with these people. I just stood up and did a presentation. You know, because Michael Breen taught me, Peter, don't present, demonstrate. So actually, when I say I did a presentation, I did a demonstration. And I just love doing that. But I wouldn't have gone if I didn't think there was a massive chance of doing business. I'm not going along to tick a box.
Yeah. Awesome.
Good
stuff. So, I mean, one of the things you spoke about there when you first started was you made an audio program, and that's one of the main reasons I wanted to get you on is because you're sort of known for helping coaches, trainers, consultants, and speakers create their own products.
Yeah.
Why is it important that you? Because I know a lot of coaches, trainers, consultants who want to have their own product, but they perhaps haven't made that jump yet. Why is it important that they have their own product line in their business?
Drew, it's a great question, and I can answer it in a number of ways, which I will if you allow me the time. The first one is this, is for me, there is one watchword in business. There's one word that is there running through the course of my life, and it's the word exposure. This is the watchword for me in business, no matter how big or small the business, we are all exposed in some way to something that happens, either ourselves, a way of marketing, an industry, a person, a methodology, a system, a mindset, whatever it might be. Exposure rears its ugly head, so you have to be aware. It's the watchword in business, to be aware where you are exposed and then do what you can to mitigate or minimize that exposure. Now, as an individual, we're exposed to ourselves. So I'm exposed to me. So I wanted to make sure that I wasn't just exposed to me, that I had audio programs that could be sold, so my income came from more than me standing and speaking. I love to stand and speak. I'm never going to stop standing and speaking. I love it. It's what I do. It's who I am. But I didn't want to be exposed to my income being only from standing and speaking. Therefore, what I did was I took my main material and I created it into a variety of informational products. I've written 3 books, 76 booklets, over 100 audio programs, over 100 video programs, white labeled stuff. I've got programs ranging from $3,000 to $7,000, right? So the whole gamut of stuff there. And so what I was making sure was that if I wasn't in the room, I was there vicariously. And I was there because somebody could buy my program. And I was playing golf, sitting on a beach, on holiday, or working with another client while that was taking place. So my message to coaches, consultants, speakers, and trainers is quite simply this, is that in order to establish your credibility in your marketplace, you must have an informational product. I would suggest you must have a hardback book. You should have a book, definitely, because it separates you from the crowd. But as soon as you're an author, as soon as you've got a stack of books to stand on, you're taller than everybody else. There's a nice picture for you. You know, get 10 of your books, stack them up, and stand on top of them. Suddenly, the world can see you. And what happens also, and it's an automatic process for those who have the balls to do it, is your prices, your fees instantly go up. As soon as you are an author, people will pay more money.
Yeah.
Now, you're not trying to rip anybody off, but the more skin in the game the client has got, the more likely they are to take consideration of what you say and do something with it. You see, this is how it works. If you don't charge enough money, people don't believe you. And if they don't believe you, they don't take action. And if they don't take action, they don't get any results. And when they don't get any results, but they paid you this pittance, they're annoyed with you. However, if they pay the right fee, they believe you, because there's an automatic connection between price and value in most people's minds. Because they believe you, they take action. Because they take action, they get some results. And because they get some results, they're pleased with what they paid you. Doesn't that make sense?
Yeah, perfect. And I reminds me of a story. Probably 3 years ago, I had a phone call from a coach who, a lady, I won't give her name, but she rang me saying, I've seen all the marketing activity you're doing, Terry. I'd like to come and talk to you about doing some coaching for you because I work in the same sector as you and perhaps we can work together. And I was interested, Peter, I have to say. Very, very interested. So we've probably on the phone for about 20 minutes and she clearly knew her stuff. And I was like, yeah, I'm keen to. And I said, just out of interest, in terms of your fees, what are we looking at here? And there was immediately, there was some reluctance and discomfort. She didn't want to talk about it. Yeah. And she goes, well, I'll be competitive, and I'll be looking at round about £30 to £50 an hour.
What?
Precisely. And I said, I nearly gave her name there. I said, look, I don't think there's any point taking this conversation any further. If you're going to be charging £30 to £40. Here's the best bit though. She then said she could reduce her fee. She clearly missed the point. My concern was, if she was charging 30, 40p, she wasn't right for me and for my market. So £30. But she kind of interpreted that as, I need to be even cheaper than that. And it's quite sad, quite frankly, that people think like that.
It is. It's because they don't value. And let me tell you why I believe this happens. It's because they work out their pricing based on other people in the market, which is irrelevant, by the way, because there is no competition.
Yeah.
We could talk about that. They work out that, and they work on their pricing based on time rather than impact.
Yeah.
Right? So once you realize the amazing impact you can have by sharing your knowledge, experience, your expertise, and your take on it, because that's what people pay for. They pay for your take on it. That's where the money is made for anybody who's a coach, consultant, speaker, trainer. You've got knowledge, you've got experience, you've got expertise, but no one's got your take on it. That's why you have no competition, because nobody knows exactly what you know. Yeah. And that's what people pay for. And they don't pay you for the 10, 20, 30, 40 years you've taken to learn it. Sorry, that's what they pay you for. They don't pay you for the few hours you're with them. They pay for all that time you took. This is the deal. You don't get paid for what you do. You get paid for what you've done. And she was charging you for what she was going to do. She wasn't charging you for all the stuff she'd done. Which is crazy.
Yeah, and it's a challenge, I'm sure you'd agree, Pete, with a lot of coaches, trainers, consultants out there. That thinking and getting their head around that concept.
I know it is very difficult for a lot of people, and the truth is, and I understand this, and it's nice that it is this. There's a terrible word to use, nice. Is people are generally self-effacing. And they don't like to promote themselves, which I understand, right? Because it takes time to learn how to do this. On my desk, I'm just picking it up here because I'm sat at my desk. I'll bang it on the desk. This is a little wooden figure, which is about just over 12 inches high. And it's a man, and he's on a little wooden platform. There's piles of money by his feet. And he's wearing a jacket. He's got his watch chain, and he's got a nice tie on, right? And he's Peter. And this is the man I talk about when I want to talk about me. Because if I ever feel awkward, and I don't very often these days, talking about myself, I can talk about Peter.
Yeah. And we've done a similar thing. I mean, we created like a caricature for both our businesses as well to do a similar thing.
Yeah, it's easy then, isn't it? Yeah. A guy I know in America, I was asking his advice. I'd been interviewing him for a program of mine, and I'd been asking his advice, and I said, how do I get over this little bit? And he said, just talk about somebody else. And I thought, well, that's so simple, isn't it? Talk about somebody else, but make that somebody else you. So I just had this as a sort of avatar, if you like, of myself in order to just talk about this person. So it makes it easy. But I mean, you get past it after a while, don't you? You just say what it is. Because if you don't believe it, how can anybody else believe it?
Yeah.
And what also I found, I agree 100% with you, is that you can't be good and cheap. You can't have both. The client can't say, I want the best of the market, but I also want the cheapest.
I know. Well, funny enough, when I'm on stage, and I think you've seen me do this, Terry, I pick a person out of the audience and have fun with them and say, I don't know if they told you this guy, John, he's got a problem with his head and he's off to see the brain surgeon. And I said he's going to see a mate of mine from Birmingham. And he's got himself a new penknife. and he's had it sharpened down to butcher's, and he's going to operate on his head for him. And, have a bit of a laugh with it. And John says to this guy from Birmingham, he says, well, how much is it? And the guy from Birmingham, oh, it's dead cheap, mate, I can do it you for 75 quid. I said, you'd run out the room.
Yeah.
And I said, we could go through this for hours, but you end up in Harley Street with the guy that says it's 10 grand, and you say yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's important enough. I saw a lovely advert years ago. It was in America, and it was for crash helmets. And it was beautiful positioning, and it said, if you've only got a $10 head, buy a $10 helmet.
Oh, what excellent.
Peter, again, you shared like a load of sort of gems there. But one thing that you mentioned there, like nothing that you said, I personally don't think that you'd get many people that would disagree with. But so many of them don't do it. And you mentioned something there like earlier on about those who have the balls to do it reap the rewards. Where's the block? Why do some people not make this change, not make the jump, become an author, create these informational products, charge premium prices? What is the block that stops people doing that?
Super question, Joe. Really, really good question. And this cuts to the heart of the whole matter. So I thank you for asking. So I'll only give you my take on it, my opinion on it is this, right? Is that people are concerned that they don't personally have the credibility to be able to say to people that their information works, that their knowledge is useful, that their ideas are applicable, and therefore they struggle to suggest the right fee rate. And I think there is a solution. It does take a mental shift, but I think there's a solution. And the solution is this, in my opinion, is to put the credibility on the ideas and not yourself until you grow into the person who is prepared to be associated with those ideas. Let me give you an example of this. You'll know, Terry knows, I know, and anyone who'll listen to this will know that one of the most famous books out there was Think and Grow Rich.
Yeah.
Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill was a series, effectively, of interviews of Andrew Carnegie introducing Napoleon Hill, who was a journalist, to his wealthy friends and successful men, as it was only in those days. And he went round and interviewed them. Now, the ideas were not Napoleon Hill's. They were other people's ideas. But they've become synonymous with Napoleon Hill as though they are his ideas over time. Yeah? So what happens in the early days is if you include in your information that you share with people through your book, through your training, through your coaching, through your hypnotherapy, through whatever it is that you do, if you include some research, which is easy enough these days with the internet, within your stuff, you can put the credibility on the information. Bob Proctor, you will know, of course, one of the most successful speakers and authors in the world, right? Bob Proctor says this. He says, I can brag about the ideas I share with you because they're not mine. Right? Now, it's a good one, isn't it? If you take it, which makes us all smile, right? You take that idea, but if you do it in the same way, you see, I talk about, I'll give you an idea of this. You'll know, Drew, Terry, you know, and your clients will know the 3 key questions of business growth. How do we increase the number of customers? How do we increase the average order value? How do you increase the average order frequency? Right? Yeah. They came from Ted Nicholas. They came from Paul Dunn. They came from Jay Abraham, who got them from Paul Dunn. Yep, when he was in Australia. Now, I've talked about those a lot to people, but I always prefix it with what I just said. These came from Ted Nicholas, they came from Jay Abraham, they came from Paul Dunn, and Jay got them from Paul. Right? Now I've interviewed Jay, I've interviewed Paul, and I've interviewed Ted. So I can clearly say to people without fear or favor, here's where I got the ideas from. Let me give you my take on this. Why would there ever be a problem attaching value to that?
Yeah.
Do you understand?
I do. Great. Yeah, perfect. Yeah.
Yeah. So put the credibility on the information, and till you grow a pair big enough to put the credibility on yourself.
That's very good, Peter. Very good.
Peter, can you, give us a time, like in this business where, like a big mistake you've made, or when things weren't going so well, a challenge that you faced. So tell us about that time, and more importantly, what can we learn from it? Like, what did you learn from it, and what can we learn from it?
Yeah, I mean, I've had, I don't want to go into too much detail, but I had some pretty hefty health challenges over the years, all sorts of things. Cancer, heart attacks, strokes,
Wow.
real hefty SH, over the years. And so your attitude and your health and doctors get you through this. But it's exposure. And so the mistake I made early on was not having products. So the only time I got paid was when I was there. As soon as I started making products, not only did I love making them, I was helping more people than I could possibly reach on a one-to-one basis. So I was doing what I'm here to do, and I was getting paid a fortune for it as well. So that was a real challenge for me. The second thing that was a mistake I made, and a guy I know got me around this, was I wasn't offering an advanced program when I did my seminars. So I would do a seminar with fabulous information. People would be with me for 2 or 3 days. They would absolutely love it. The testimonials were great. I'd make some good money on the weekend or the event anyway. But I wasn't offering a mentoring program on the back of it, which was crazy. And then when I started doing the mentoring programs, I wasn't offering an advanced mentoring program on the back of the mentoring program, which was crazy.
Yeah.
So these are the classic mistakes that I've made in business, is to never, or I didn't, sorry, I do now, obviously, but not offering the next level of connection for my clients. Because there will always be a small percentage of clients who want to go to the next level with you. So if you have a program that's £500 a month, there will be some clients who want to spend between 5 and 10 times that amount.
Yeah.
So I have another program that's £2,500 a month.
Awesome.
This is the way it is. And I've got other clients that have paid £50,000, not a month, but £50,000 in order to access my knowledge, experience, expertise, and my take on it. But the mistake I made early on was not doing that. I've probably thrown away millions by not offering it. How crazy is that?
Peter, I'm sure you're not the first, and you won't be the last.
I definitely won't be the last, that's for sure.
And Peter, what books have you read that you would recommend to coaches, trainers, consultants, and speakers listening to this?
Well, there's one book I always recommend, and it would be an unusual one because it was recommended to me. And it was recommended to me by 2 people whose opinion I highly rate, and as people I highly rate them as well. And the one was Ted Nicholas, and the other one was Stuart Goldsmith. And both of them mentioned Ayn Rand to me, A-Y-N, new word, R-A-N-D. And Ayn Rand is the person that came up with the philosophy of objectivism, or certainly wrote about it. I think it was probably her idea. In fact, I'm sure it was. And she's written a number of amazing books. And the book that I'm talking about particularly is Atlas Shrugged, as in Atlas, A-T-L-A-S, the person holding up the world, and Shrugged, S-H-R-U-G-G-E-D, Atlas Shrugged. And it's a thick book. It's 1,072 pages. It's 9-point font, and there's no paragraph breaks. So this is a serious book.
Yeah.
I have bought and given away, I'm going to have to guess, but I was going to say 500, but probably more like 300. I've certainly bought 300 at least of this book and given them away. And those people I've given it to have read it, have come back and said the classic line, "You've changed my life." Well, it wasn't me that changed the life, it was Ayn Rand. And it certainly changed my life. And it's a story, it's a really good story, it's a well-written story, and it's the story of when the entrepreneurs go on strike and what happens to the world when that happens, and the fact that, everybody is responsible for their own lives and their own actions, their own results, and it's an amazing story. And the Fountainhead is another one by Ayn Rand, a very similar story. I've read a lot of Ayn Rand, so I would urge anybody to read that. I think the classics, most certainly, would be such things as Think and Grow Rich,
Yeah.
getting hold of a copy of Lead the Field, I think it's available in the sort of book format, The Secret, The Stranger's Secret, that type of thing. But I am a voracious reader, so I read all the time, both fiction and business books as well, because I think the day you stop learning is the day you stop earning. The world moves pretty quickly. You've got to keep up. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%.
Here's a book I'd recommend, Peter, that you may have heard of. Conversation, The Power of Persuasion.
Yeah, that's a pretty good. Mind you, the author's such a nice chap. You just want to buy it anyway.
Seriously, I read that. I don't know how long ago. 4 or 5 years ago, and I still refer to it now.
Good. If anybody wasn't clear that was listening to us now, I wrote that book just in case there was no clarity. In fact, let me add another one. I would add this book into the mix. And I like these two authors. It's two brothers, and they're Chip and Dan Heath, H-E-A-T-H, two American professors, and their books are first rate. There's 3 I know of, and I've read all 3, and I think they're really good. But the middle one, which is called Switch, How to Change When Change is Hard.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that, yeah.
Yes, I think is a stunningly good book. And my favorite expression, and I love expressions, they give me a way of remembering things and hanging my mental hat on them. My favorite expression comes from that book, which is resistance is created through a lack of clarity. And I think that is applicable to every area of life. And it's applicable to marketing, it's applicable to business, it's applicable to goal setting, it's applicable to relationships, it's applicable to argument, it's applicable to absolutely everything in your life. That resistance is created through a lack of clarity. Awesome. Isn't that awesome? I wish I'd written that.
Awesome. And Peter, where can our listeners go to find out more about you and what you do?
I have 2 simple websites. The first one is peterthomson.com. And that's no P in my surname, so it's Thomson, peterthomson.com. I'm sure the Australian golfer who won the Open 5 times is rather disappointed that I got that website many years ago. That's quick off the mark. And the other one is peterthomson.tv, which is sometimes live and sometimes not. And it's live if I happen to have any one-day events going. And I do have one-day events coming up, and I'm able to say that with impunity, regardless when this goes out, because I've always got one-day events coming up. So if I've got one-day events coming up, then peterthomson.tv will live. Other than that, peterthomson.com, where someone can sign up for a free report about so-called time management. And if they wish to, they can get my free e-zine called TGI Mondays.
Awesome. That's peterthomson.com and peterthomson.tv.
Indeed. Peter.Pete. Yep.
Awesome.
And well, I'd also ask that if you get an opportunity to attend Peter's one-day event, I would strongly recommend it.
Yeah.
Both Drew and I have attended it, and if you want to take your business to the next level, attend one of Peter's events. You'll learn so much. Peter, you've shared so much in this interview that could make a massive difference to coaches, trainers, consultants from around the world.
Thank you, guys.
Awesome stuff here. Absolutely awesome.
Good stuff. Peter, again, thank you very, very much for joining us. We will speak with you again soon. Until then, take care, take action, and see you later.
You're listening to Maverick Marketer Unleashed podcast. For show notes, additional resources, and podcast updates, head over to www.maverickmarketerunleashed.com.